Hello and welcome. Here in front of me today I have a fallen saber from Saberforge. Now recently some of you who follow my posts on social media may have noticed that I've recently gotten a 501st approved Revan costume. And that was why I picked up this saber. If that's something that interests you, stay tuned because in not too long I'm going to be reviewing or doing a Becoming Revan setup or Becoming Revan video, kind of like I did the Becoming Nihilist one. That's going to serve also as sort of a review of some Wicked Armor pieces. But today I wanted to first tackle the saber itself. Now this is one of several Revan sabers on the market. Ultra Sabers makes one that's kind of a Revan saber. Vader's Vault definitely makes a Revan saber. Poxtor has even started making a Revan saber, and Rogue Armories makes a pretty good one. The Saberforge Fallen is a pretty standard, very close to screen accurate, probably in one of the top two, this one and the Vader's Vault Revan Elite. But let me give you a close-up of the saber and then I'll start talking about the features. Now this specific saber is a champion tier. Saberforge, well actually I guess it's a veteran tier. Saberforge has recently started offering veteran tier, which is what used to be champion tier. It's their older model soundboards. They've used the newer Saber Core soundboards as the champion models. So if you want to save a little bit, you can bump back to a previous version of the board and they call it a veteran tier. Like all Saberforge sabers, the prices on these things is a little bit deceptive. When you go on there, you see a price for an empty hilt. You add electronics to this hilt, they call it a warrior tier, and they say add $100 or something like that, but it doesn't update your original price. It comes in at the bottom of the list. If you add a veteran tier or a champion tier, you're looking at adding in a couple or 250 or so. To the price of your saber. So they charge a lot for their electronics, but they're solid electronics. The wires come loose from time to time, but if you're familiar with sabers, you can fix those up. And they've got a decent amount of features. If you want to see some of the features of a champion board, this board has the same features as the video I shot a while back of a Xiphos saber from Saberforge. So you can go through that one if you like and see what the features are of this board. One thing that this board has that my video on the Xiphos didn't that I wanted to talk about is the energy vibration feature that Saberforge offers. Basically what that is a little vibration motor in here that at certain points when you're going through the menu it will trigger. When you hit things or when it triggers sound effects it's supposed to trigger. The vibration is something that I actually don't recommend because by and large I consider it to be a gimmick. A good sound card, especially if you're going with a champion tier, a decent sound card that's putting out a decent amount of bass, it's going to be vibrating because of the reverberations off of the bass from the sound foam. The vibration that you get out of that vibration motor is unnoticeable next to the vibration off of the bass, unless you're really looking for it. When you're dealing with a saber that vibrates when you clash a saber against anything and see what happens to it. It vibrates because you hit it on something. A motor that augments a vibration that is already there doesn't have much use to me. It is neat at various points in the menu, and it does give you a sort of tactile response to feel your way through that when the saber buzzes. So it's a neat effect. I don't mind having it on the saber, but if you're ordering from them, you might not want, or you might want to consider whether or not it's worth the extra to you. This saber also is weathered. Now weathering through Saberforge is actually kind of a nice feature. They offer clean hilts, they offer black and white staggered hilts. The weathering, they hit the whole thing with like a black anodization and then they sand it circularly so you end up with this sort of rugged weathered look, which for something like a Revan Saber is actually a really nice touch. So I like Saberforge's weathering. I don't much care for their vibration motor. Their sound cards are pretty decent. If a bit expensive. But this design on the Fallen Saber, this design is straight out of Knights of the Old Republic. We've got a gold brass accent right here. We've got a silver rest of the saber. We've got the rises where they're supposed to. We've got an ASP pommel, so I could change it out if I wanted to for any other ASP pommel, but this is straight out of Revan. And overall, a very solid saber. Another interesting thing about this saber is that the blade depth on it is very deep and very solid. This tension screw right here is the LED. This is the blade. The blade comes down to about here. So that's usually a saber is going to have about 2 inches of blade depth. This is closer to 3 to 4, which means the whole thing is more solid. If you're going to use it for dueling, it's a very solid dueling saber because it's got a very deep set. It also feels more solid, and there's no chance of it wobbling or the blade getting loose and wobbling like you have if something's set or has blade set up here. So, Fallen Saber from Saberforge. One last thing that I would say about this is it is heavier than I anticipated. I don't know if it's the aluminum that they use or the thickness of it. Part of it is definitely the thickness. But Saberforge sabers seem to be heavier than I would expect them to be, with the exception of a few of the thin models. The Ronin, the Disciple, those are pretty light. But when you get up into what they consider to be their elite out of their apprentice sabers, you're dealing with sabers that have a fair amount of heft. So this, I've been very happy with this as it relates to my Revan setup and my Revan costume. It's exactly what I wanted for that, which is why I ended up with it. And I just thought I'd take a moment and share it with you and do a quick review. Hopefully this has been of help. If it has, please join me back for more.